Good evening, Mr. Fume, and thank you very much for joining me on the Sami Parvez show. It has been a while to see you again.
Oh, it's happy to be on. Happy to be back. Thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, sir. Let's talk. There are lots of things going on, particularly in recent leaders' debate, and today we learned that Green Party was removed from leaders' debate as they could not fulfill all the criteria. But I need to ask you first of all, like the criteria was different in 2019 than 2021. Suddenly they changed it completely different in 2025. It seems like they try to uh, exclude People's Party. So, do you think like this leaders debate commission is fully an independent body?
Well, I don't really have an opinion on that. It was kind of a weird. This is a weird story because there was some questions over the weekend and earlier this week about if the Green Party were eligible because there's eligibility criteria here. Let me take a look
Mhm.
here. Yeah, so I had the eligibility criteria right here on my screens in front of me, and it just went away. I apologize.
All
Um,
right. Okay.
but
I think you should have one elected MP from your party. The other is like you must have like 4-5%
Yeah,
polling, and the third one is 90% of candidates.
right. And parties must meet two out of
Two.
three of those criteria. So I'm looking up because I my
Hmm.
a lot of big screens in front of me,
Yeah, yeah.
so it looks like I'm craning my neck. It's just the screen above it here. But yeah, so the parties have to meet two out of those three criteria. Um, and it's already they weren't polling enough. The rules say you have to have at least 4% national support. But right now they're only polling at about 3%
Hmm.
support. So they're just below that.
Yep,
And
yep.
with the Green Party strategically removing members of their party out of the running, yeah, that was enough for the leaders debate commission to say, you know what, enough's enough. We have to draw the line here. And really, it's when you look at it, it was almost to me, it almost seems like it was charity giving Greens even a seat at the debate because, really, no one really takes them seriously. I don't think a lot of people take Elizabeth May seriously. I don't think people take their platform seriously. I don't think you know, they have enough support to get, seats in the House of Commons, but when you're really up against like even Bloc Québécois or NDP, which, or any other parties, it's like,
Hmm.
if you're gonna give the Green Party a seat, you might as well give the PPC a seat. Or you might as well give the Canadian Action Party a seat or whatever. So a line has to be drawn somewhere, and I think that I think the Leaders Debate Commission did the right thing here.
But they intentionally like try to exclude People's Party, or they just made the rules little bit different as compared to in the past. Like People's Party supporters says it like that. But what's your take on it?
No, I don't think they were specifically working to exclude PPC. I don't think that's right at all. But they have to draw the line somewhere.
Mm.
There's you know the liberals and conservatives are these days, and the way the Canadian politics is these days, for right or for wrong, it's they're the only two parties that matter. The NDP haven't mattered federally, I don't think ever, and in this election they've mattered, but as little as they've ever mattered in a while. It's shocking to see how, you know, I
Mm.
I wrote a story yesterday on the national results and the Legier's national polling, and more people in the NDP think Mark Carney's doing a better job running this campaign than Jagmeet Singh. In fact, Jagmeet Singh came second to Carney, tied with I don't know. So it's really, I think that right there says a lot about the current state of the NDP, where the party's membership thinks that the leader of an opposing party is doing better than their own leader. I think it's the NDP really needs to take a look in itself and do some self-reflection and decide are they on the right path? Do they want to be known as you know a party that is known for vile activism and things like Israel Palestine,
Mhm.
or just being an also ran. I think the NDP really need to look inside themselves and decide what kind of a party they're going to be. Are they going to be the voice of the progressive left? Are they going to be the voice of radicals and criminals? Are they going to be the voice of the working man? It's all you have to do is look at seeing how many endorsements the conservatives are getting from unions. Unions that have never endorsed a conservative candidate in their life, and suddenly they're endorsing the conservative. It's the NDP are going through a big change right now, and they have to decide which side of the fence they're
Mhm. Yeah. Last question with respect to leaders debate commission. But we see like we have UK and Australia and New Zealand. They have the similar system. Like this is called Westminster voting system. It is
on.
called.
The Westminster parliamentary system. Yep.
Yeah, Westminster parliamentary system, and they are also, whenever there will be an election, the debate would be between two parties, like Labor versus Conservative. So shouldn't, why Canada is differently, like on this criteria? Is it because Canadians are too polite?
I don't know about that. Hey, I think that you could say that Canada has a three-party system, but really it's when you look at it hasn't always been that way in Canada. There's the NDP, the Conservatives, and Liberals have always been kind of the big three. But for a while we had the Reform Party and the Progressive Conservative Party, the Alliance Party. The right likes to splinter in this country, but it seems like that. Now these days the left vote is kind of the splinter. You've got the NDP and the Liberals splitting a lot of votes that really takes votes away from the conservatives, and or at least vote share at the very least. And it creates some very interesting situations in terms of allowing the candidates to win. So what I just said made absolutely no sense. I apologize about that. Just went off on a tangent there. But
Mm,
yeah, it's kind of weird how in the modern state of the democracy, we always kind of weeds out into two separate, two parties. Like the states is the kind of the classic example of that. The Republicans and Democrats, right or
mhm,
left, red or blue. Here in Canada, it's liberals and liberals and conservatives, and some people who are too liberal for the liberals go to the NDP, and with that kind of you've always got that flying around. And yeah, it's interesting how that works out. Both within and without the Westminster parliamentary system. It kind of everything kind of like just sort of percolates into two separate parties. It's interesting.
mhm. As earlier you were mentioning about NDP, like NDP is not NDP leader or its supporter or the campaign team does not don't know where to stand, like whether it should be with workers or like the protesters or other folks. So is it the end of NDP as we are seeing, like they are polling below five? I think there was a poll they were polling like five, six, or seven, something like that. Like it seems like it is expected the NDP leader Jagmeet Singh could lose his own seat. So will there be an end of NDP after this election, or what do you predict, or what are you hearing from your sources about
Yeah,
this?
I don't think the NDP is going anywhere. I think that probably the biggest shake up should be maybe Jagmeet Singh. He's definitely has not lived up to the example set by some of his predecessors, like Jack Layton. It's hard to rule in the shadow of Jack Layton. Thomas
Mhm.
Mulcair ended up being that person, and he did a reasonably well job. He's still around, he's still respected, and it's going to be interesting to see what Jagmeet Singh's legacy is going to be once he hangs up his spurs. It's going to be interesting. Yeah, like in terms of the NDP, like I've got the Leger Ontario poll results up right in front of me. I'm just I'm talking to you while I'm writing a story, so
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know,
sorry, sir.
it's
Thank you.
it'll be fresh once you're once this gets to air for your viewers. But yeah, liberals are currently in Ontario. It's 47%, conservatives at 40%, and NDP at 7%. And those numbers are pretty consistent when it comes to sort of how the rest of Canada looks. Ontario is kind of like the barometer for the rest of Canada. But yeah, like it's the whole NDP question. It's interesting. Like a story I'm working on for this week. I'm hoping maybe to write it tomorrow. Is I talked to a lot of left wing Jews, members of Toronto's
Mm-hmm.
Jewish community who, you know, they told me their whole life they voted NDP, but with all of the anti-Semitism and all of the anti-Israel stuff that has been going on with the federal NDP. Joel Harden, the Ottawa Centre and MP for the NDP. He was down at Parliament Hill marching with the mob with that anti-Israel protest over the weekend. You got Matthew Green in Hamilton who is flying the same flag. You've got the it's it's something the NDP needs to deal with. The Ontario NDP, Merit Stiles, she established her leadership style early on by not falling for the Sarah Jama nonsense. She took a firm stand when it came to her and, kicked her out of the party and didn't let her in when the provincial election came around. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's, the provincial NDPs across Canada always seem to have their shit together better than the federal NDP. You know,
Mm-hmm.
for all of its faults, Rachel Notley's government in Alberta, they were a completely different animal than the federal NDP. They were, as much as it can be, they were pro Alberta, pro pipelines, pro oil. Well, as much as it can be, but being an Alberta NDP is completely different than being a federal. And I think that being an Ontario NDP is different than being a federal NDP. So, yeah, I think that the federal NDP has been lost for a while. I think the federal NDP died with Jack Layton. They've
Mm-hmm.
never been able to regroup themselves after that loss. And Layton was a great guy. He was. I'm I don't politically agree with anything, but that the NDP did or that he does. But and he was a great leader. He united the party, and he was
Mm-hmm.
he was that party for a long time. That was the party of party of Jack Layton, and they just never really recovered after that. And I think that I think Jagmeet Singh is not done as good of a job as I think people were hoping he would, being sort of a young, dynamic, you know, young breath of fresh air to a old and stagnant party. And I don't think that he lived up to those expectations at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so like is liberal changed their leader, the number changed for them, and so do you think like if NDP changed their leader, like we would it could be a different scenario today.
Hard to say. I think the problems of the NDP go way beyond their leader. I think that like I said before, the NDP needs to decide who they're going to be. Are they going to be the party of the working man or the party of the radicals? The party of organized labor, the party of solidarity, or are they going to be the party of hatred and division? I think that the NDP need to come to grips with that. Until we see that kind of that radical element, infecting a lot of organized labor in this country,
Mhm.
particularly the federal, the federal public service unions, and provincial public service unions as well. But until the NDP can learn to rid themselves of that element, they're going to be in this constant state of flux, this state of upheaval. It's sad to see to any political party, but they're going to have to get their shit together.
Mhm. And a couple of weeks ago, I had Bryan, who is a pollster from British Columbia. I know you know him. So he predicted or he said like that there could be a merge between NDP and Green. Do you agree with him?
A
Should
merger?
it be happen?
I don't know. I don't know if that would ever work. I don't know if like they you know, they're yeah, you know they're left leaning parties, and other than their hatred of Israel, I don't think really they have
Mhm.
a lot in common. Um, you know, the Greens are holding on. You know, you've got Elizabeth May, and they've got they got Jonathan Pedenalt keeping the party together. They're co-leaders. I don't know exactly how that works, but you know they're keeping on. But you know they're kind of a political sideshow in in Canada. So NDP and Green merging, I don't know. I don't all due respect to Bryan, I don't see that happening. I don't think that
Mhm.
it's just you know they're two peas of different pods, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So let's jump to like pollings, as you said. Like, I think when last time we spoke, so the conservative was a very ahead, like they were leading from 20 to 22 or 24 points. Against liberal, but today the things are changed. It seems like conservative are trailing by. Uh, I think there was a poll like what you are saying, like it is 7 to 8 points. There was at the morning, like there was a Abacus poll, which was liberals were down, but conservative were still trailing by 2 points. It means their main lead is in prairies in Alberta.
Mm.
So in Ontario, particularly, they are still behind and way behind in Atlantic Canada. So things are changing. So do you think so they could come back from today tonight debate or tomorrow? Uh, will there be something magic happen?
Well, you know, smarter people than me have you know said that that people don't watch people don't watch debates to make up their mind. They watch
Mhm.
debates to sort of confirm their opinions. I don't think debates will really change anything. I think that the conservatives are facing a sort of a perfect storm. You know questions aside about how well they have or have not been running their campaign. It's the Donald Trump factor that's really you know factoring into their boost. You know, the gap was closing, but with Trump renewing his 51st state comment yesterday or the day before, um, whenever Trump amps up his rhetoric, the liberals pull ahead. People panic and they start going to that. But Canada's problems started a lot earlier than Donald Trump. It's I think people sort of want to change, but at the same time, they're also afraid to take that leap. Especially when it comes to that. I've got the Canadian polling numbers up in front of me right here. Um, where is it here? But okay, I lost it here. But Donald Trump favors in heavily, but it really is broken down by sort of by party as well. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, here we go. Like there was the Leger poll. How much has Donald Trump influenced your choice of which political party leader you will probably vote for? 58% total said that you know Trump's had an influence on their vote, and 37% said they didn't. And that's broken down by party. Um, 79% of liberals said that Trump influenced their decisions, whereas 42% of conservatives um, I'm sorry, 55% of conservatives said it didn't. So really it's how you react to Trump, sort of, it sort of says a lot about your political leanings as well. If you're a conservative voter, these numbers, you're less likely to be influenced, whereas you're a liberal, you're not. So you are. So yeah, it's the Trump factor weighs in big in this election. And I think that it's I think this is going to be probably one of the more interesting elections to see the results of. I can't wait for the 28th. I'm really sort of interested to
Mhm.
see what happens and see what changes because whether whatever party wins or loses,
Yeah.
a lot's going to change, and there's a lot happening in this election. I think that it's no matter what happens, I think it's going to be an interesting watch once the results come in.
Yeah, as you mentioned, like whenever Trump talks about Canada or annexing Canada or tariffs, like the number go ahead. Like even though Nick Nanos last time, I think 1 week ago, told CTV News, I mean it could influence a lot to the voters who they need to vote. It's so it mean whenever there is no talk from Trump, like it means a conservative could take a lead, but suddenly things change. But my question is, so is yesterday CBC reporter Katie Simpson particularly asked this tariffs and annexing Canada. So do you think was it an intentional question or it was just journalistic question?
It's you know, I was thinking about that today, thinking like, I'm surprised there hasn't been a lot of conspiracy theories about if Katie was put up to ask that question. I don't think that's true. I don't think that she's not a core member of the White House press gallery. She doesn't she especially the CBC. It's not like the parliamentary press gallery where they have pretty good free reign. They probably her opportunity to ask questions are far and few between. So I don't think that any political strategist in Canada would be banking on her being able to ask that question, just with the logistics of how the White House press corps works. But it's no, it's I think sort of the reaction to is like I said before, the reaction to Trump's response, the press secretary can't talk today. I'm sorry, press secretary's response is that shows that how much power Trump has in Canadian politics right
Hmm. Yeah, but like she said that US is subsidizing particularly Canada's military. So is it true what Trump is suggesting and what is press secretary said?
now. Well, a lot of what Trump says, especially about Canada, just isn't true. And yeah, this it's one of them. It's to him, it's all rhetoric and bluster. It's and fact there's a reason that there's whole industries and whole people out there who devote their entire career to fact checking everything that President Trump says, because a lot of the stuff he says it just is not true.
But does Canada have the ability to defend itself without US assistance?
Oh, that's absolutely true. Yeah, Canada for years has relied on the U.S. to, you know, be its best friend and pull its nuts out of the fire. It's that's I think that's kind of unfortunately been the heart of Canada's military policy for a lot of years. Yeah, so I mean that's kind of the unfortunate thing is that when Trump talks, he spews a lot of bullshit, but he says a lot of truth too. That a lot of the world has been taking the U.S. for granted. Canada's been taking the U.S. for granted.
Mhm.
Whether that warrants a full trade war, I don't know, but I think what it has done is I think it has opened our eyes. I think it has opened Canada's eyes specifically to how much that they use the US as a crutch when it comes to enacting policy, particularly things like energy policy. Um, you know, there's there's never been a need to build a national pipeline across Canada because you know the US has reliably, you know, purchased our oil and allowed their oil to transit their country that an issue. But now suddenly, we're not able to transport our Western Canada oil east without going through the US. Um, when it comes to but defense policy and stuff, for a long time, defense policy has rested on the fact that, well, if anything bad happens, the U.S. will always protect us, but I think Canada needs to wake up to the fact that the U.S. isn't always going to be there for us, and the U.S. isn't there for us right now. So I think that it is a bit of a come to Jesus moment for Canada that we need to start building our own, our own building on our own shores to ensure that we're in a place that we can protect ourselves. It's like it's living at home with your parents is great, but sooner or later they're going to want to kick you out of the house. So I think that Canada, it's I think Canada, it's a problem Canada's had for a long time, and it needed the wake up call of Donald Trump to be able to for us to come to answer for that.
Mhm. Yeah, but why Canada always budge on spending more on defense? Like it has been a long time. Even though last 10 years, we could not reach 2% GDP spending on defense. So, is there like lack of funds or resources to Canada that it could not spend much on defense?
Well, there's been no political will to, because it's, like I said before, that we've always Canada's policy is that that NATO and in other words, the U.S. will always be there to protect us, and that's one of the reasons why that the past 10 years that the defense spending has dropped off, because it's that coupled with a government that you know that that puts the military in sort of a lower interest category than previous governments. But yeah, it's a combination of the two.
Hmm. Yep. Okay, so let's now talk about the policies. It seems like there is not much talking about immigration and also like defense spending. So immigration has been completely baked down. Like it has been a issue in the last two election or three, particularly in 2015, but not this one. Even though in today's leadership debate it would be discussed, but not in the English one. Is there is there so why this is happening?
I don't know. It's a good question. It would suggest that the producers of the debate feel that immigration is it's either a more sympathetic issue in to French speaking Canada, or a more important issue to French speaking Canada. I don't know. It certainly, the optics of that decision is not good. It sort of suggests that perhaps the English media or the English world is less, and they always have been less, comfortable to talk about immigration than in Quebec. In Quebec, they're a lot more open to talk about at least about the issues of immigration, and the benefits and the perils of the issue. But yeah, it was an interesting decision for them to drop it off the English roster.
Hmm. Yeah, but so we have seen like liberals were always welcoming newcomers or immigrants or refugee, but suddenly they changed their tone because they were dropping in the polls. But right now there is no talk about it at all. As Pierre Pouliot sometimes said, like he's going to deport illegal immigrants, but there is no words from liberal leader. But how do you see, like, if liberals get re-elected, and are they going to bring back their old policies, or there would be a new policies, like changing the immigration number or bringing merit system back?
Well, I think the one thing that Carney has sort of shown himself willing to do is kind of, he's a lot better at reading the room than Justin Trudeau was. Trudeau was kind of like, damn the torpedoes, my way the highway. Um, I'm gonna barrel through the commercial carbon tax, and who cares what anyone thinks. Whereas you got Mark Carney, who's a bit more pragmatic and a lot more down to earth than Justin was. The first thing he did upon becoming prime minister was to cancel the consumer carbon tax, and that saw, you know, not only did that see a big price drop at the gas pumps, it also took the wind out of the sails of one of the most prevalent campaign plank of probably of the conservatives was axe the tax. And granted, Carney didn't axe the tax; he just got rid of the consumer portion, but
Mm-hmm.
the far more insidious and costly aspects of it, the industrial end of it is still in effect, and plus people won't be getting their quarterly carbon rebate checks anymore. But I think that you know let's just be plain here. We're probably going to see the Liberals get reelected on the 28th. Um, I think you can expect Carney to be a lot more pragmatic than Justin was. I think you're going to see him, realizing that, that is, the previous government's immigration policies were out of control. Particularly when it comes to international students. Um, you know, I they're there were cuts announced before the election, middle to late last year, and I think that I think if you want to see what Carney's going to do, I think it's going to look there. I think that they realize that it's if they do get reelected, it's probably going to be a minority again, and which means that they're going to have to be a lot more careful about how they deal with it because I don't think you're not going to see another supply and confidence agreement with the NDP again. Um, so it's going to be yeah it's I think that Carney's going to hold the course on that. I don't think that he can afford to be as contentious as Trudeau was. I think that the Liberals, I think, at the very least, have learned a lesson when it comes to that. Trudeau was kind of a he was kind of a wild presence. It was his party. It was his way of the highway kind of thing. So yeah.
So, as conservative leader Pierre Pouliot is running away from the media, particularly distinct himself, like taking just four questions from like four reporters, and there is no follow up, and also he avoided giving interviews to CBC, and there were some other media outlets too, but he gave like recently to Toronto Sun and some other independent media. So what do you take from it? Is he running away from media, or he just does not want to like to be in front of media to answering some tough question? And also is like other party member or candidates who are also not available to the media.
I don't think he's running away from the media. I think that, anybody who watches him in press conferences he knows how to he knows how to handle tough questions. I think this is more of an exercise of him showing he doesn't need the media. And it's a bit of a dangerous game to play because, it's, I'm not saying he needs to suck up to the media, but at the same time, it's like, you know, one of the big reasons why Carney is ahead is that people always get afraid of things like Trump, of sort of the Trumpian things, and him sort of doing the whole fake media stuff that Trump does. It kind of puts a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of Canadians, and especially some Canadians who might consider voting for him. I understand what he's doing. I understand why he's doing it. He's not having media travel on the plane, which I think is I think the optics of that are bad, but at the same time, it's like he's right. It's not, this isn't 20 years ago where we didn't have CPAC and we didn't have political parties streaming their press conferences. We didn't have Zoom. You weren't able to even like 5 or 6 years ago, it was unheard of for people to ask and attend press conferences remotely. Um, it's I think it's a dangerous game. I think that there's some people who may be inclined to vote for the conservatives who might be turned off because when it comes right down to it, the what makes or breaks elections are that silent majority, the people who don't give a shit about elections, people who don't have signs in their lawn, people who don't spend their days on on echo chambers and social media. Um, like those are the people that these people are ultimately pandering to. Those are the people that they need to attract the votes, and by even just giving sort of the implication that you're doing anything that may remind you of Donald Trump, I think that translates into lots of votes of the conservative side. It's a dangerous game they're playing. They're going to have to be careful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I'm going to just ask you last question. I'm sorry about that. It would be a very quick one. Is Pierre Pouliot talks about lots of like cutting, reducing bureaucracy and cutting the spending, but there is no talk about MPs' pay raise. So will there be an end of MPs' pay raise uh, in the upcoming years, or it will continue to grow? Like they will keep getting a pay raise on every April 1st, and there were no questions from any reporters to any leader.
Problem is that there's so much going on right now. Like I think if this was like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I think that MP pay raises would have been a bigger issue. But we got so much going on right now with the trade war, and tariffs, and immigration, and crime, and just issues like that. and they're not even on most people's radar right now. I think most people right now are concerned about, the cost of living, the cost of housing, the fact, I've got to come up with 2,400 bucks for my rent in a few weeks. I think that, those are the situations I think that, you know, issues like that just fall by the wayside. But, it's low hanging fruit. Harper froze pay raises, and, it didn't translate him getting reelected again. But, that's one of those low hanging fruit issues I think that, politicians can go to if they need to. But I just don't think that factors into it right now. There's too much going on.
Yeah, they make like every issue make you busy. Like you should not be thinking about that issue at all. Okay, sir. Thank you very much, Brian, for joining me. Thank you so much for your time. I know like you are a very busy man, but despite that, you joined me, and looking forward to seeing you again another one, hopefully before election.
Oh, thank you. Anytime. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you, and take care. Have a good night.